In today's video, we're taking a look at a variety of NHL news and rumors focusing on the Edmonton Oilers, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Ottawa Senators, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Minnesota Wild, and more. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news and rumors to get into here. First, let's kick things off with a couple of quick news updates. First of all, Columbus Blue Jackets top defenseman Seth Jones is going to be out for an extended period of time. He's being listed as out indefinitely with an ankle injury after colliding into the Colorado Avalanche net in a recent game here. So that's clearly bad news for the Blue Jackets, who have been a very upbeat and surprising team this year. After all the players they lost to free agency last offseason, they've been very competitive, getting some outstanding goaltending from Elvis as well as Korpisalo in the past, and they've really been giving teams a run for their money and been a bit of a surprise, as I mentioned. So this is a big blow to a team fighting for a playoff spot, but it seems to be a bit of a trend in the Metro Division with teams losing some other top defensemen as well. You could look to Dougie Hamilton in Carolina and Adam Pelech with the New York Islanders. They're certainly not the only team in that boat, but it certainly could possibly add another team looking for defense ahead of the NHL trade deadline. Now, as I mentioned before, the Columbus Blue Jackets were a team I didn't really figure would be overly active this year after going all in last year and giving up a lot of assets to acquire a lot of players. I just wasn't seeing them doing that again this year. They gave up a lot of picks and prospects and other things last year at the deadline, and I just don't know if they're really in a position to be able to give up a whole lot of anything this year, but maybe a depth defenseman might be something that they can add. Clearly, they're not going to replace Seth Jones, that's for sure. He's a top defenseman, not only on their team, but in the league. Jones, along with partner Zach Werenski, one of the top blue line pairs in the NHL. So this is certainly a big blow to their playoff hopes. And obviously, the longer he'll be out, the more it's going to hurt. So we'll guess we'll have to monitor that situation and possibly look to add Columbus into the mix here as a team, maybe looking to add a defenseman ahead of the deadline. Also here with the Columbus Blue Jackets, partly due to the fact that Jones is hurt, that the Blue Jackets have opted to call up forward Liam Foudy directly from junior from the OHL, which is not something we see very often. Typically, players come up from the American Hockey League, but Tortorella has mentioned that the reason they've gone down that road is they want somebody with the speed and skill that he presents. So he is being called up to make his NHL debut in their next game. So Foudy will get a chance to play. He will have to go back to junior. This is just an emergency loan. He will not be with the Blue Jackets for very long, but certainly an interesting aspect here. They've also called up a defenseman from the American Hockey League who'll take a spot in the Blue Jackets lineup as well. They have a few other things going on with their roster, but one of their top prospects, Foudy, will get to make his NHL debut here very shortly. Now let's jump over to the Edmonton Oilers. They announced late last night that they were signing defenseman Darnell Nurse to a contract extension. Or I should say NHL insiders broke the news late last evening. The team officially announced the signing just a little while ago earlier today. So he's been signed to a 2-year deal at $5.6 million. Of course, Darnell Nurse was recently a restricted free agent where he signed a short-term deal, and now he gets another short-term deal. And I know some Oilers fans are a little bit concerned because this does technically walk him directly to being an unrestricted free agent. But based on all the comments being made by NHL insiders and the team, it doesn't sound like this is really a case of Nurse really wanting to test free agency as early as possible, although for some players it is an appealing aspect. But ultimately, this is due to the Oilers' salary cap constraints and all the other bigger contracts that are tied up here with the team. They can't commit too much more money for too long extended of a time, at least not as of yet. Many believe that after he's partway through this contract, once he's got 1 year in, that they will sit down to discuss a long-term contract and should be in a much better situation cap-wise to be able to complete that at that time. Many people have said that Nurse wants to be an Oiler. They certainly love having him a part of that blue line and want to ink him to a long-term deal. It's just the numbers just don't work for cap purposes right now. So I guess we will see how that goes in the future, but Nurse is having a great season, appears to be a big part of the Oilers' blue line for years to come, and we'll see if that next long-term deal can be done like many are expecting it to be done here now. Now let's jump over and take a look at the Ottawa Senators. Now the Senators are a team with a ton of players who could be moved ahead of this NHL deadline, but many are saying, including Bruce Garriock, the Ottawa Sun, and also works with TSN, that it could very well be a much quieter deadline than many have expecting it to be. There's certainly lots of players, like I said, that are pending UFAs. It could be moved, but there's not really clear exactly who's going where as of yet. There's certainly some players who likely won't generate a lot of interest, like goaltender Craig Anderson. Anderson hasn't had the greatest season. The last few games haven't been good. He's played well in stretches, but his overall season has not been great. He got pulled in his last start. Overall, making a lot of money, even retaining up to 50% of the salary that they'd be able to, it would still be a tough pill to swallow for teams looking for goaltending. I know the only team that remotely kind of made sense was the Florida Panthers, who are looking for a backup to Sergei Bobrovsky. It would certainly work well for Anderson, who does have a full-time home in Florida. So from a personal perspective, it would work well. But you know what? It's going to be tough for the Panthers to take on that contract, so it's really difficult to say. Other players like Vladislav Nemestikov, Mikhail Bodker don't really appear to be generating a lot of interest. Nemestikov came into the Senators after being acquired from the Rangers, had a hot start and then really cooled off. The last 20 or so games really hasn't been overly productive. He's been good on the PK, been dangerous shorthanded, but most other situations not really generating a whole lot. Of course, there's also a couple defensemen like Ron Hainsey and Mark Borowiecki. I fully suspect Borowiecki to be re-signed. He and his wife just celebrated the birth of their first child, so that's big news on that front. I know he's looking to get something done so he can know what the future holds for his family, where he's going to be playing. I just don't see them letting him go. He's been such a big part of the community, such a big part of the locker room. He's a good leader. Certainly plays that physical style of defense that is not as common in today's game, so I do think that they will figure out a way to keep Boro in the cards. Hainsey's a whole other different case here. He's a veteran guy, could certainly generate some interest, but there is a possibility he could remain in Ottawa as well. Possibly even extend on another one-year deal. It's not a complete given, but it's also been known that GM Pierre Dorion hasn't really had much in the way of contract talks. All been quiet when it comes to his top player, JG Pageau, who is certainly having a career season and getting a lot of interest on the trade market. Many do believe that it makes a lot of sense for them to sign Pageau and keep him in the fold. And you know what? Depending on what Pageau's looking for a contract, it may or may not work out. But the fact that there haven't been any talks yet certainly leads us to think that the odds of him being traded are certainly greater than being signed. But all it takes is a couple of phone calls, and if a contract can really get done quickly. That is a comment that Dorion had made a little while back once he first returned from an overseas scouting trip. That really doesn't. Contracts can come together rather quick if both sides kind of want the same thing. You also look to defenseman Dylan DeMello. DeMello's another guy getting a lot of interest. There's a lot of teams looking for defense ahead of the deadline. He's had a pretty nice season overall. He can play up and down their lineup on the back end. With the Senators, he's played a lot of second, third pair. Occasionally plays with Shabbat as well on the top pair. Just kind of a very versatile defenseman, having a good season, but not on a great team. On most teams, he'd probably be a third pair guy, or he could certainly add a much needed depth piece as well. So another guy that the Senators are certainly contemplating on what to do. I do think the odds of DeMello getting traded are certainly probably greater than re-signing, in my opinion, as well. But one player that does make a lot of sense to be traded and could probably fetch a half-decent return is Tyler Ennis, who's on his another one-year contract, pending UFA again. Certainly been able to kind of restart his career after a stint with the Maple Leafs last year, playing with the Senators this year, having a nice season, putting up some good goal totals and point production, playing a lot of different situations for the Senators. So I could see a team maybe looking to add a player like him ahead of the deadline for a depth piece. He's got a great skater and can certainly still have that goal-scoring touch. So I could see Ennis being an attractive piece as well. But many believe that the Senators might not be in a mass sell-off mode like we've seen in the last couple of years, and their trade deadline day may be much quieter than many have expected. Now, one name that's been brought up here yet again is Minnesota Wild forward Jason Zucker. Michael Russo of The Athletic is reporting that Zucker's name continues to come up in the rumor mill. Of course, he's interviewed the player multiple times and recently says that the player doesn't really want to talk about the trade rumors any longer, and I honestly don't blame him. Zucker's been in the rumor mill for the better part of almost 2 years now. Came close to being traded on a couple of occasions, but for various reasons, those deals fell through. He does have a 10-team no-trade list, and many believe that all of the Canadian teams are on that list, as well as a handful of American teams. But the one team that's shown a lot of interest in Zucker over the past 1 or 2 seasons and continue to, according to NHL insiders, is the Pittsburgh Penguins. And many believe that the Penguins are not on his no-trade list, so there would not be anything else blocking a deal to the Penguins unless there was another piece. Like what happened before is he was likely going to be involved in that Minnesota Wild Pittsburgh Penguin trade for Phil Kessel, but Kessel blocked the deal. But if it was another player not having a no-trade clause, then he could become a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I know it's not quite clear what GM Bill Guerin wants to do, but clearly he needs to go through adding some more scoring to this team and kind of rebuilding it a bit. And you're going to have to trade some value to get some value back. And certainly players like Zucker and Matt Dumba and Jonas Brodin, their names have all come to the forefront of the trade rumor mill in recent weeks as we get closer to the deadline. But the main team that's been linked to showing interest in Zucker, like I said, is the Penguins, and he certainly would be a nice fit there. I'm sure there probably are a few other teams with interest as well, but they seem to be here at the forefront. So I guess we'll see. The Penguins have also had their eye on some other forwards, but they've had a long-term interest in this player, so we'll see if they continue to pursue him. Lastly, here's another article I took a look at with the Edmonton Journal, discussing the possibility of what the Oilers might be doing ahead of the deadline. There's no secret that the Oilers likely would want to add another scoring winger, and one player that's been brought up here by the Edmonton Journal is Devils forward Blake Coleman, who can certainly put the puck in the net. He's going to become a very versatile two-way forward. Certainly could provide a nice addition to the Oilers lineup and play up and down the lineup in a variety of situations for them. Of course, they are getting James Neal back, returning shortly as well, and Connor McDavid did have another bit of a scare with another potential knee injury. He did skate in practice this morning and then left for treatment, which was part of the original plan. It doesn't look as though anything's too serious in that situation. Nothing like what happened before that he dealt with at the end of last year, but it is questionable whether or not McDavid will be in the lineup for the next game. But Coleman's certainly an interesting player. It's not quite clear what road the Devils are going to go down. Of course, they have a new GM with interim GM Tom Fitzgerald. Not quite clear exactly what his plans are going to be. It's obviously not quite clear if he's going to be the GM longer term or not. So it's not sure what moves he's going to make, but certainly could go down the route of trading a few more veterans to kind of get this team more into rebuild mode. And Coleman certainly would be an attractive piece, along with another guy like Kyle Palmieri as well. No guarantee either one of them get moved, but certainly could be a nice addition to the Oilers. The article mentions possibly if Jussi Puljujarvi and maybe a draft pick might be appealing to the Devils in return for Coleman. I'm not really quite sure that would get the deal done. Obviously, a player like Puljujarvi might be of interest to them. Certainly another young prospect to add into their mix of young players. Probably would be something they would want, but they're giving up a lot of value in an established player like Coleman. They probably would want something a little bit more substantial. So I'm not quite clear there would really be a deal there without the Oilers parting with something else as well off their roster, another younger prospect to throw things into the mix there. But we'll see. The Oilers certainly make sense for them to be on the lookout for a forward. I'm not quite sure Coleman is the ideal guy, but we'll certainly see what Ken Holland's plans are here shortly ahead of the NHL trade deadline. And as I mentioned here, injuries are certainly going to play a role in many of these teams' decisions here in the coming weeks. That is all your news updates for today. So, of course, as always, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.